we were 11 years old as a band. We just recorded a new album and we were about to embark the promotional campaign that inevitably sells the album. So I was in Dublin airport, about to fly out. I got a call from my mom and she said, I can't get your dad. She said, he's not answering the phone. There was something in my mind telling me something's wrong and I cannot get on this plane. So I phoned him again and no answer. So a friend of mine's younger brother worked in the same building and I phoned the number and Neil answered. And I said, Neil, have you seen my dad this morning? And he said, yeah, he's upstairs. I said, can you run up to his office? Would you mind? So as he opens the door to my dad's office, he said, I'm just walking in now. And then the phone went dead. So I phoned him back. He didn't answer. I phoned him back. Eventually he answered and he was quite distressed. And he said, he's on the floor. He doesn't look good. He looks a little grey. Anyway, long story short, the story goes on. My dad had passed away very suddenly from a heart attack. And that's a moment then where your world changes forever.
Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a licensed therapist, author, and mental health advocate. On today's show, we have a conversation with Nicky Byrne of the boy band Westlife, one of the biggest bands in Irish history and internationally. They sold over 55 million copies of their albums. They've had, 16 number one singles. Just an enormous band. I mean, the numbers are staggering, especially for a band that never really crossed over to the States, which we talk about a bit with Nicky. But he's a really interesting and driven guy who's achieved a lot and continues to achieve a lot. So we're looking forward to that conversation. But with me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maylard. How you doing, Duck?
I'm also huge in the UK. I don't have much of a following here, but over there, I'm like David Beckham. I'm really huge.
Oh, you played football?
Yeah. You didn't know that? That's why my knees are
I
gone.
did not.
No, I was terrible at football. I played soccer in sixth grade because it was the first sport I was allowed to join, and all I wanted to do was be a defenseman and sit in the back. And they're like, "No, you're young and fit. You're going to be a midfielder and run the entire length of the field." I was like, "Screw this! I'm going to go play baseball." So yeah, my soccer career did not last long.
Way.
Yeah,
soccer was something that every kid in Southern California did, and
Yep.
so I did it for probably 5-6 years. And watching little kids that age play soccer, though, it's like, is it really soccer? Because
it's no different than t-ball when one kid hits the ball and 9 kids run after it into the outfield. There's no there's no sport. It's just hilarious. So.
It's just a big huddle of a bunch of kids all around the ball, and there's no skill really to it. It's just kind of
well, there's usually
a swarm of bees.
One kid. Yeah, there's there's 10 kids who don't know what they're doing, and one kid who grew up playing football in his backyard, and he's usually a kid from he grew up in the UK and then he moved to New Jersey, and he's the best soccer player anyone's ever seen. So,
well, maybe that's different. Maybe it's different in the UK. I mean, and I know that it's weird. I feel like it's a common thing you hear. A lot of celebrities in the UK were footballers first, and then went on to be singers or actors, or I don't know. I guess it's just that prevalent that if you're a star in that, then you're probably going to be a star in life.
I mean, it's a very American centric view of being where are all these people that play soccer? It's the most popular sport in the world, and we're the only country that are oh, isn't that cute, soccer? It's huge.
Right.
And you spend any time in the UK and you get a sense of the history of it, and some of those clubs have been around since 1850 and stuff. It's you see it a lot on Welcome to Wrexham and the history of the game over there, and the importance that it plays. So you can understand why it's so vital to them. But for us, we got baseball, I guess. It's not the same fervor.
Well, baseball used to be the American pastime, but I feel like football has sort of supplanted it. I mean, American football.
But anyway, I'm good. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. It's the ebbs and flows of private practice and single life over here at my house.
Right. We often talk about, kind of come up with things to talk about for our intros, and throughout the week, you'll see something, you go, oh, I got to remember that to bring that up to Ryan.
Yeah.
And I saw something today. I saw an article the other day that I wanted to get your take on. I wanted to talk about the concept of cringe. Is that something that comes up in your practice? I mean, with younger kids, I think it's more prevalent, and the idea of cringe being well, that's awkward, that's embarrassing, and so it makes people stop before they even try because they don't want to come across as cringe. They don't want to come across with what's called pick me energy. You know, a lot of kids who are like, oh God, he tries so hard. It's so cringe. And I get a little bit of it with my son and his peers. But do you run into that? Do you hear people talk in your practice about like, I want to do this, but I don't want to come across as cringe, or I don't want to do this. So they just end up not doing anything.
Well, I actually don't work with a lot of kids. I did work with teenagers at the center that I worked at for 3 years, but in private practice, I work with adults. So
it's not exclusive to kids, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's young
I mean,
adults fall victim to it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the concept, and what leapt to mind first when you said the word cringe, I just imagine most kids that are entering adolescence, their fathers or their parents in general become just cringe. Everything they do, oh God, Dad, you're so cringe, right? And so is that why that's coming up for you? Is because your son
probably
is
yeah. Anytime you're with a group of kids and you're like, "Hello, fellow youths, would you like to talk about the rock and the roll?" And they're like, "Oh my God." So I've learned to just keep my mouth shut.
I remember my dad tells this story to this day. Apparently I wasn't as bad as my brother in this regard, because I mean, I remember at a certain point around 13, 14 years old, just being like, oh, my parents are so uncool. And I just, don't embarrass me. And you know, my dad, I mean, he's like the king of dad jokes. So, I mean, that was wonderful when you're young, and it's wonderful now,
right.
But in that age range, it's the most embarrassing thing ever. But my brother, apparently, when he was in middle school, or maybe 13, 14, same age, apparently. I was still in elementary school, but there was carpool at Brentwood School. And so you had to, in order to get onto campus, you had to carpool. And so a lot of mornings, my dad was driving him and like 2 or 3 other kids from our area to Brentwood. And he said, Josh was like mortified every time, because my dad in the car, he'll sing along to the radio, he'll try to pick out the harmony, he's always trying to chat everyone up. He's like, so what are you into? Do you like science class? And my dad, apparently Josh would just like look, like stare daggers at him like, Dad, stop it. Don't embarrass me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that that's not an experience that most people can't relate to. I mean, I think that happens for most people when you get to that age. But I do think, yeah, that does block us a lot from trying things, because you don't want to be that person who puts yourself out there and is trying too hard. I don't know. It's interesting that you're pointing at that as something that's happening now. Maybe it's something that never has ended. But I feel like in my teenage years, there was a particular trend in terms of what was cool and what wasn't cool. Mm-hmm. It wasn't cool to try really hard, I feel like, in the 90s. I feel like in the 90s, you were supposed to be good at things, but not because you tried. It was, you had to have this kind of laid back attitude, like, whatever, I don't really care that much. And then I feel like in the millennial generation, maybe 10, 15 years later, it became a lot cooler to be a hustler, and nowadays when you see pop culture on social media and stuff, there's a lot of that culture of like, I'm a hustler, I go out and make things happen, much more than there was in the 90s. Yeah, and that's interesting to me. I think I've had a hard time adapting to that mindset, because I come from that like, I don't give a fuck kind of attitude of the 90s. But I guess underneath that, even when the surface level is, I don't care, I'm aloof, or you shouldn't try that hard, you really do care. I mean, every teenager cares so much, like how they're being perceived. It's just the counter, it's an overcompensation, right? So that's probably
the crux of the article was mainly that, whether it's I never know how to label the generation, whether it's Gen Z or millennials or whatever, but it's having such a profound effect on, they're not even getting started trying something new for fear of being cringe. So it's sort of limiting people's exposure to new experiences or meeting new people or dating in person and all these things, because they just don't want to be perceived as cringe. And so it's like, it's having more of a psychological effect than it did maybe on our generation, who certainly no one ever I mean, like you say, my parents were embarrassing to me, and you know, I mean, we've heard stories of the coolest people, the coolest rock and roll stars and movie stars who are like, nope, my kids still think I'm an idiot and they're not impressed by me. And I think, you know, I try to think of myself as a dad. I'm like, I was in a rock band. I wasn't Maroon 5, but I was in a rock band, and I'm an actor. I'm on TV. Like, I do voices for animation. I'm a cool dad. Nope, same thing. Like, I've learned, I used to pick up my son from school with his buddy every week, and I stopped trying to be like, so what'd you guys do today? Did you have a good day? And any cute girls, and like literally glaze over. And so I am the chauffeur, and I know my role. You know, it's something we talk about in our interview today, knowing your role and not trying to go push outside of it. And it makes for harmony in the band, on the football pitch, and in the car after school pickup.
I think that I may have told this story on the show before, but, you know, I'm sure not everyone listens to every episode, so I could repeat it if I have. When I went into becoming a therapist, in my mind, like, my teenage self is still a big part of who I am. Like, that part of me is a big part of the voice in my head. And I'm just like, I think I can really relate to the teenagers for that reason. I understand their anxieties. I understand the rebelliousness and the angst and all the things that go into, you know, trying to find yourself as a teenager. I really still relate to that. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be a therapist, but I'm still relatively young, and I was in a band. I was in Maroon 5. Like, I'm going to be the cool therapist, right? I'm going to show
rock
up.
and roll therapy.
Right. And I'm going to be able to connect with these kids in a way that others can't. And of course, I got into my first group therapy with a bunch of teenagers, and they could not give a fuck. I mean, it's like, I'm just another old guy who doesn't get it. And maybe it was that. Maybe it's, you know, it's like pulling teeth with teenagers to a large extent, because they don't want to step out. They don't want to be the one who is trying too hard and have that look at me energy. So in a group, like, no one's going to be the first one to speak. They're all sitting there in silence, and you're like, hey guys, well, tell me about, you know, it's basically the same thing as dad energy. Tell me about school. Like, how's it going? Do you like physics class? You know?
You bring out the
and nobody.
Hey, I'm Brian, the rock and roll therapist.
So it didn't really work out the way that I imagined. But it is a magical thing. It takes time to earn their trust and for them to finally let down those walls. And when they finally do, it is a pretty nice thing to see, like, oh, they're letting their soft, vulnerable side out, but it's hard won. I mean, sometimes it's like you could be in sessions for 6 months with a teenage client before they finally just let that barrier down and allow you in. And
you know, you said it's one of the things that sort of, maybe it's hamstringing us a little bit in this career, in that we don't have that same hustle of, like, because it feels, you don't want to impose. It feels cringe, yeah. But I'm going to say it anyway, because, you know, we watched it before we had our own podcast, and you always make fun of people saying like and subscribe, but it's true. You do have to ask, and you have to put yourself out there. So I'm asking you, if you're watching this episode and you're not a subscriber to the Heart of the Breathe podcast, please do so. Subscribe on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. Follow us. You'll get updates on guests, new episodes coming out every Tuesday. Well, you can interact with us in the comments. You can email us at heartofthebreathepodcast@gmail.com. We will answer your questions, and we promise we won't embarrass you and make you feel cringe. It's a very safe space conversation. So be a part of it, and don't make me put myself out here for nothing. Don't make me cringe for nothing. Please subscribe to the show.
See, when you do it, it doesn't feel cringe to me, but when I do it, it feels cringe.
Well,
so that's why I let you do those.
It feels cringe to everybody when they're doing it, but to the outsiders, it's like, hey, you got to do it. It's part of the gig.
Yeah, and if you like the show and you want to see us continue and continue to grow, then get involved. You know, leave a comment and do all the stuff, because it helps. So thank you for listening every week or watching. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I know you're going to enjoy this conversation right now with Nicky Byrne of Westlife, right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast. So Nicky, what's a day in the life of Nicky Byrne these days? It seems like you're doing a lot with the podcast and hosting gigs. And what is your life looking like these days?
It's a lot calmer. It is busy, but it's a lot calmer than it would have been through the years. You know, Ryan, from your time in Maroon 5. So we started with Westlife in '98 when we were all teenagers as well. We signed a record deal with Simon Cowell in 1998, and all of a sudden we were hectic. We were in Sweden, we were in London recording, and it just got crazy busy from there. And Westlife exploded very, very big, very quickly. Our first 7 singles went to #1 in the UK, which is a world record. It went from 0 to 7. You know, every single was debuted at #1. The rest of the world started to break really, really quickly. All of a sudden, we were everywhere. We were never home. And I won't bore you with the story of Westlife. So we get to 14 years and we split. We have 7, 8 years off. And we all did our own thing then. So I went into entertainment world of presenting and radio and TV. So my life became more routine, which I loved because I'd had 14 years of living out of a suitcase. Now, I have no regrets of that. You know, it gave me the best memories ever. But I guess my life then became easier from a perspective of I had 3 children at that point. 2 of my twin boys who were starting primary school. I wanted to be home for that, and I was. And then a little girl who was just born. So I was on national radio here in Ireland, and then I was hosting Dancing with the Stars on TV as well over in Ireland. And I had a good, I guess, good routine, good way of living. I haven't done all the crazy stuff with Westlife. And then 8, 9 years later, the reunion chats started.
Like they always do.
All of us, like they always do. And it was too much of a good thing to turn down from everyone's perspective. Obviously, the finance of it speaks for itself, but bigger than that, we wanted to do it again for our own children. We wanted our own children who'd all grown up a little bit now to see what Daddy did. What we didn't expect was 2 things. We didn't expect the reunion to be as big as the first offer that came through. We immediately got offered a UK and Ireland tour, but that stretched into, obviously, Europe. Then it went to the Middle East. Then it went to Asia and China multiple times. And what we quickly noticed was that all the kids that from when we got together in '98 as a boy band, those young teenage girls, ultimately at the beginning, were all women now who were married and had their own children. So this reunion was, and also their husbands, who would have never been seen at a Westlife show in a million years, were, obviously subjected to hearing the songs through the 14 years. And then what happens, as we all know as grown men, you kind of start to not give a shit. You go, I'll go along to see Westlife. I don't care. It's not my cup of tea, but so what? And then all these guys were coming along going, I'm really enjoying this. It's a big pop show. There's beer. Everyone's having fun. The sun is shining. And the tour extended. And then our manager had this wild idea. I think I touched on this recently with you, Ryan, on my show. He had this wild idea where he said, look, guys, I know you broke the whole world in 14 years, bar America. We'd one minor hit with Swear It Again in 99 in America. And again, the story there was we were signed to Clive Davis, and then he left Arista Records, went to Jay, and we kind of fell through the cracks. At the time, pop music was losing its, I guess, momentum on American radio. So we had everywhere bar the States. And then he said, but I had this crazy idea. Now that all the fans have grown up globally, you boys have sold 60-odd million records, there must be a big expat community in America from both Irish, British, European, Asian. I've spoken to Live Nation, and they'd love to put an American show on sale. We were like, wow, because we thought the American dream had well and truly gone in 2000 or whatever. And all of a sudden, we sold out Radio City. We sold out 3 nights in Toronto. We sold out the arena beside MGM in Boston, Fenway Park, and we sold Chicago, the theater. And Live Nation actually said we should have put on Madison Square Garden. Now, to hear that as a 46-year-old man, having lost the American dream when you were 21 or whatever it was crazy. So, we did that tour a year and a half ago now, and all the families came. To walk on stage for the first time in our career, having done a year of promotion in America back in 99, 2000, having to walking on stage in Radio City, and you've done it. It was a very proud feeling. And what was interesting was we thought we were ultimately playing to Irish and British people living in the States. But actually, when they did a little bit of research, the biggest community that were coming to the shows was the Asian community in America. So it was loads of Irish, loads of British and Europeans, but mainly it was Chinese and Asian community, which just goes to show the strength, I guess the strength of the band outside of America, but also how small the world has become nowadays, particularly from a social media perspective and all of those. So I think I've moved on from the question you asked, but the day in the life now on a time now that we're not together with Westlife. I present the podcast. I obviously don't have time to go back on radio. So the podcast is pretty much what I do every day, recording people and stuff. I usually get people in studio, which is better. But 3 children who I love to take to, school and hobbies, etc. And we're celebrating 25 years of Westlife next year. So we're doing the Royal Albert Hall later this year, and we're recording some new tracks as part of a Greatest Hits album. So yeah, that's my life will get a lot more busier from next month onwards when the Westlife train starts to roll again.
Nicky, did you say that you guys never played America, or you did 1 year in America back in '99, and I assume not to as much fanfare as this recent tour?
It's we definitely tried, so you'll remember, you guys, you're similar probably ages to me. '99, there was no social media, there was no internet, there was no, when you demoed a record or whatever, you got the CD to go away with. It was, those were the times, and the kids nowadays will never understand that. So when we went to America, the first time, Simon Cowell was our guy in the UK. I remember Cowell, who wasn't a big star at that point in America. He hadn't done X Factor or American Idol or anything yet. He was a big A&R guy in BMG Records, which became Sony BMG. So when we had all this success in the UK, ultimately at the start, and Ireland, and then Europe, Clive Davis obviously was on board immediately, going, we need to get these guys over. So we did started with a lot of conferences, BMG conferences in Boston and America. In fact, I remember performing at a BMG conference in Boston, and Simon Cowell sadly got a phone call to say his father had passed away suddenly in London. And Simon left the conference, jumped on Concorde at the time, and flew home. And he then said to us a few weeks later, my dad's favourite song was Swear It Again, which was the big the big ballad for us. That was our first #1, but it was also our only ever minor hit in the States. So it was kind of special to us at that point. But when America came on board at that point, I remember Simon saying to us, whatever they want to do, let them do it. If they want to dress you in tracksuits, if they want to dress you as a rock band, if they want to cut your hair, if they want to shave your hair. Now, nowadays, this wouldn't happen. But we were a very successful boy band, having had 5 #1s at that point. But we were coming over to the United States, and Simon Cowell was giving Clive Davis the freedom to do whatever they wanted with the brand. Mm-hmm. So we reshot the video for Swear It Again in Burbank, in California, and it was a petrol station, so a gas station, as you guys would say, and there's like a car wash. It's a funny story. I was going out with my wife at the time, my girlfriend back then. And I remember the video director was a guy called Nigel Dick, who had shot Baby One More Time for Britney. Mm-hmm. And he'd said, Nigel came into the 5 of us, and there was all these like models, female models, outside dressed in like skimpy little outfits, part of the video. And he said, I need one of you guys to be sitting with the girls, both of you licking an ice cream. I was like, well, I'm not going to be doing that, because my girlfriend, I don't know if I'm ever going to get that over the line. So we had a laugh about things like that. But my point being was, we handed everything over to America, to the guys to make it a hit. So we did some TV. We did Regis and Kathy Lee. I think Regis has passed away since. Mm-hmm. So we did Regis and Kathy Lee. Andrew Berkowitz, Ryan, who you know really well. Yeah. And the guys in the record label, I think it was a guy called Adam Lowenberg. Did you ever work with Adam Lowenberg?
Name sounds familiar, but I don't know him as well as I know Andrew.
The guys had this incredible idea, it sounds daft now, of putting us on QVC, because they went, you perform these 3, 4, 5 songs live on TV. If people are watching, I don't know, washing up liquid, and then they go buy it, or a magic sponge, and then they go buy it. Well, if you guys look good, sound good, sing well, maybe they'll buy the record. So we went, we'll do it. So we did QVC, and we all ran around the back of the set, and we were watching the computers, and the guys were going, oh yeah, there's 1,000 albums, now we're on 2,000 albums, now you've gone up to 4,000 albums. So that was one kind of crazy moment that didn't really pay off, but they thought it was worth the shot. But we were doing 3 states a day. Guys, we were getting up at 6 a.m. We were doing breakfast radio. We would then leave the breakfast radio, go to the airport, This is pre 9/11 as well, when it was a lot easier to fly. We would straight on a plane. We would land in a different state. We would do lunchtime radio, and then we would do maybe a TV junket day, and then we'd get on a plane that night and land in a different state to do that breakfast radio the next day. So we did that for just in America for about 2 months solid. Then we were doing the festivals and Z100 and Kiss FM, and then we would be out for dinner at night time and with the radio kind of people to try and charm them. And
sure,
you know, it's a young man's game. There's no doubt about it. But we definitely tried. But Swear It Again is a great song. Regardless, globally, it's a great ballad. It's a really good song. It's very similar to the song in the '90s, I Swear. I know if you know that by is it All for One?
All for One. Yeah.
And it's similar to that O-Town record, All or Nothing, which was written for us that Simon Cowell turned down, and Clive Davis then took it for O-Town. So yeah, some funny stories all happening around the same time. But yeah, we tried, but the American industry, radio industry at then had be it Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney, Christina. There was a real kind of stop of this pop music, and we didn't quite get through the cracks at that stage, but not for the want of trying. There's no doubt. Sure. You know, all the radios, all the TVs. There was no podcast back then, but had there been, we would have been on them all as well.
I want to back up a little bit just because it's interesting to me. In this country, we've seen Simon Cowell on American Idol and America's Got Talent and all these shows. We've seen him be the bad guy. We've seen him be the guy who discovers people and creates careers. And we're aware that he had this whole career in UK before. I know that before you were in this group, you were a footballer growing up. You were professional as a teenager, right? And at some point, the group that you ended up joining already existed, right? And you came in at a certain point as a replacement, right around the time when this group was getting signed by Simon Cowell, and things were going to quick level to the dreams of millions of becoming a pop star. What kind of shift was that for you in terms of being a young man, having one identity as an athlete? Was music already something that was a passion? Was that were sports the bigger passion? Was music the bigger passion? And what was it like for you to step into this role within this entity and just take a total left turn in terms of your focus at that point in your young adulthood?
It's a great question, and people in Ireland that will watch this will be bored stiff with this story because I'm sure it's been documented many times. But for context, to answer your question, when I was a kid, a bit like you, Ryan, it was all sport. Mm-hmm. It was soccer was my thing. I love music. I love bands. I love singing. Now, my dad was a painter and decorator by trade, but at nighttime, he was a rock star, we'll say. He was in a band, and he was the lead singer. Nicky and Studs was the name of that band, and they were talking the 70s, 80s here. And they would do, my dad, he's passed away now, but he had the dream of being the Beatles, Elvis. That was his thing. So he put a band together in his teens, and he was in a band for his whole life in the evening time. So he was a working band. They would play at weddings. They would do, 21st birthday parties. They would everything. And he would cover all the big songs that were in the charts. And they were very good. So my childhood, my love was sport, but my life was being around my dad in the evening times. Well, I wouldn't have gone to the shows because I would have been too young. But in the afternoons, I would be helping him set up his equipment and plugging in the microphones and going 1, 2, 2, 2, ladies and gentlemen, 1, 2. And then we would be singing, and they would record everything on big occasions. If they did a big night for Halloween, in the local pub, he had a residency that they would play every Saturday, Sunday. So like big occasions like Halloween was huge in the local area, small town in the suburb of Dublin. And everybody would come to the event dressed up, 400 people dressed up. My dad was the band, the entertainment for the evening. And then they would also dress up. The band would dress up as well. There would be sing-alongs. They would call people up to sing. So it was like karaoke before karaoke and without the lyrics on the screens, So I always knew my dad was a bit of a rock star in the local area. And I suppose, you love your dad anyway, but I suppose I admired him for that. And when soccer became, the older I got and I was at a really high level, I started to be scouted by UK clubs. So the UK and Ireland obviously different, but we're only an hour away from the UK. So to get to London from Dublin is an hour flight. Manchester is 40 minutes. Liverpool is 20 minutes. So I got scouted to go for a trial for Leeds United, which was a 40-minute flight. So I was 15. I went over and they absolutely loved me. And I was a goalkeeper. So one thing they always mentioned was, you're not the tallest goalkeeper in the world. So we have to keep an eye on that. Now, I was only 15, so everybody expected or hoped, including me, that I would jump to over 6'1" or 2 or 3. I don't know what that is in meters, and I think you measure in meters, don't you? But
No.
I'm 5'9". I'm 5'9" and 3/4, just under 5'10". So that in the UK and Ireland game is probably not tall enough. Maybe in Spain and on the continent in Italy, it's a bit more technical, and the height from goalkeepers might not be needed as much. But the British game and the Irish game is very physical. The ball, from a goalkeeper's perspective, it's pumped in on top of you. Now, I was quite fit, quite agile, quite brave, and it never really affected me. But from a professional perspective, I think clubs kind of worried. But they gave me a 2-year professional contract, and I went on to play 2 years at Leeds United, and I played for Ireland under 15, under 16, under 18. And then when my contract came up for renewal in 97, they said, look, Nicky, we can't give you a new pro deal, you know. So I found myself a little bit on the scrap heap, a little bit. I suppose internally I felt a bit like a rejection. You know, you leave Ireland with all these hopes and dreams. I remember having a big going away party with a couple of hundred people of my friends from school. And everybody, probably like you, Ryan, when the band started, everyone's going, oh, remember me when you make your first million, and don't forget me when you're famous. And I went away, and then within 2 years, I was back home. Now, I did have offers to sign at a lower level in England, but the money would have been not much better than Ireland. So kind of thought, well, no point in being alone in England when my family's in Dublin. So I came home, and I had promised one thing. My dad had always said, go and give it your best shot. Ireland will always be here. We'll always be here, which I thought was great advice. My mom, same advice, but a bit more academic concerned, and said, I'm a bit worried that you haven't completed your high school. So I left 1 year before high school completion. So in Ireland, that's called the leaving cert. So everybody would like to get that piece of paper in your hand. The rest of the world is your oyster. So I hadn't got that. So I came home, I played semi-pro football in Ireland, and with a couple of, well, I won't say how much money I made out of Leeds United, but it would have been decent money. I probably made a lot more than my school friends had made in 2 years. So I felt rich because my mates had they were only starting their college and work. Mm-hmm. And I bought a karaoke machine, and I said to my dad, if you have the time, you're gigging so much with the band, but if you can squeeze a day in where you could host karaoke locally and somewhere with me, I'd love that. And he said, of course I will. So I went around and I printed up these business cards called Father and Son Karaoke, after, I don't know if you know the song Father and Son by Cat Stevens.
Sure.
And I called it Father and Son Karaoke. Got some gigs, went around the pubs and clubs and said, I'm with this new karaoke duo, Father and Son. Can you give us some work? So we started working and getting some gigs. So I started getting my confidence singing then. More and more and more, started entering competitions, and then this audition came up for a band. But in the meantime, before the audition of the band, I had gone back to school and completed that final year. And I also applied for the police force in Ireland, which is an Irish word over here called An Garda Síochána. So I applied for the guards, and I got the guards. So I had 6 months before I was to start training with the police. And in that 6 months, the audition for Westlife came up. And that's where you say the boys from the west coast of Ireland had started this band in high school, had taken it to a guy called Louis Walsh, who was a kind of pop Svengali, had a boy band in Europe called Boyzone. And he was looking for a new band. He found me and another guy, and he put the two of us with the three guys from the west coast. and Westlife was born. And then we were in auditions, in rehearsals, and then Simon Cowell flew in to see us. Now, this was about a year or two after the Spice Girls had become enormous. Mm-hmm. So Spice Girls were signed to Virgin Records. And our manager really, really, really wanted us to sign to Virgin. He had Boyzone with Polydor, and he really wanted Westlife with Virgin. So we had Monday, we had Virgin Records flying to Dublin to see us. Tuesday was somebody else, and Wednesday was BMG. So Monday, we had rehearsed for weeks. It was a big day, big audition. A bit like you see X Factor, American Idol nowadays. We're on stage, people down, the big wigs are in the chairs. And it was 4 girls had flown over from Virgin. And we sang, we did maybe 40 minutes. And then we jumped off stage. We went down, we shook hands with them all. We sat with them for maybe 40 minutes, whatever, an hour. And then they left. We thought they loved us. And when about an hour later, 2 hours later, Louis, the manager, they said, yeah, you're great guys. You know, you all can sing. Sounds great. Look great. We don't want to do it. And that was the rejection of me. She's like, wow. Then the next day was Polydor, I think, and they already had Boyzone. I think they wanted to do it, but a bit concerned about having a similar band. And then Simon Cowell flew in. And we did the 40 minutes, like I said, but Louis told us after 40 seconds of us doing an a cappella of, I think it was If Tomorrow Never Comes by Garth Brooks. And he said, I want to sign this band. And that's when all of our lives changed forever. We were in recording. Within a month, we were in with Max Martin in Sweden, who was doing Backstreet, Britney, NSYNC. Mm-hmm. And we were back in London with a guy called Steve Mack and Wayne Hector, who were 2 up-and-coming at the time singers or songwriters and producers who, I mean, for example, Steve Mack wrote Shape of You with Ed Sheeran. Steve's done Shivers with Ed Sheeran. But we were his first, if you like. We broke with Swear It Again, written by Steve and Wayne, and many, many other songs. So, yeah, life changed forever then.
Now, the other day on your show, and thank you again for having me on, we talked a bit about identity in my story and how difficult that was for me in terms of my identity with Maroon 5 and finding my own identity separate from that. Now, it must be a wonderful thing, especially in Ireland where Westlife is like maybe the biggest boy band of all time there, to be so strongly associated with the name Westlife. Nicky Byrne, Westlife, they go together. But what is that like for you being Nicky Byrne? Is that all a positive, or is there any extent to which your identity at that point where you jump into this juggernaut is a little bit difficult, especially when you have to leave that and figure out who am I separate from that?
Yeah, I think, if I'm being honest, seeing my dad being that kind of rock star in a local town, I think I craved that, if I'm honest. I think I was good at football and I was a decent singer. I got better and better and better, like anybody will with anything you put time and effort into. But I think I wanted to change my life. I think I wanted to be famous. I think I wanted to be wealthy. I had this urge to be on stage, but I didn't want to be famous and wealthy nowadays from a reality TV show, if that makes sense. You know the way like people just want to be famous and they think that fixes all the problems. Mm-hmm. That wasn't me. I there was more depth to me than that. I was a hard worker. You know, like I said, my dad was a painter and decorator by trade. We wanted for nothing as a kid, like, don't get me wrong, but we weren't rich. You know, my mom and dad would always find the money somewhere for new goalkeeping gloves, new football boots. If she had to borrow it from her own mom and my grandparents, they would. So I think I had this inner delusional thinking of, I am going to change my life, my family's life. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. So the football was obviously what I thought was going to happen. It's funny, my mum and dad, I don't know if anybody believes in this stuff. I'd love to. I kind of half believe in it, but I'd love to believe it more than I do. My mum and dad went to a fortune teller when I was a kid, about, you know, just because they were a friend of the family. And they gave 3 different things about all their children. So I have 1 brother and 1 sister. Those other 2 things came true with my brother and sister, which I won't go into. But for me, they said, your son is going to be internationally known and you're going to go and see him play in Wembley Stadium. And that came true. But at the time they said that, I was probably 10 years of age. So when they told me that, I was convinced it was soccer professional football in Wembley Stadium.
Sure.
But it was with Westlife. So I know that's probably digressing a little bit, but anyway, I had this inner. So when the rejection came, and I came home and I was that police moment, and I was hosting karaoke, I still saw myself as somebody who could make a record, who could join a boy band, or join a rock band and learn a craft of songwriting, or, I just knew I had all this energy and hunger, and I needed to channel it in the right way. And I probably needed a little bit of guidance. So when I went for the audition, it takes balls to stand up on a stage when you're at any level, but particularly when you're unknown, to try to convince somebody that they can market you. And that's why I admire all the kids that do American Idol, Pop Idol, and all the rest of those shows. Because I was that kid. It wasn't that show, but I was that kid. So when I got into the band and it exploded, all the dreams did come true. Saw every country in the world. I've been in pretty much every country, maybe not every country, but most countries 1 million times. I've been on stage in front of thousands, and I still don't take it for granted. I love it. Probably one of the luckiest guys in the world, like we all have to get that opportunity. But there are times when you go, a bit like you touched on the other day, Ryan, when you left Maroon 5, and it took you time to figure out or remember that you actually were a good listener, or you were talented at baseball, or you're really good at doing something that you never got the time to do while you're in Maroon 5, because it's work. And I will never, ever regret working my ass off for the band, because it's given me everything. But there are times when you go, like during COVID, for example, my best friend, one of my best friends, works for the Post here in Ireland. So like the workers, the first, what were they called? The main workers, the doctors, the police, the Post, they stayed working. Whereas music was obviously, put to the one side, and many other things. I remember after a year maybe of COVID lockdown, ringing my best mate and thinking, I didn't have the radio anymore. Westlife couldn't do anything. I wasn't on TV where I was hosting Dancing with the Stars. I was doing nothing in my house for a year with a wife and 3 kids. Now, I was a lot better off than a lot of other people in those situations, so I didn't have those worries. But I was going a little bit kind of insane. I say that kind of crazy, going like, what am I going to do? When's this going to end? And I remember ringing my best mate up saying, can I go to work with you today? Can I help you deliver some letters? I'll jump in the van. It didn't bother me. I would have done it. He wasn't allowed to do that. Of course, He couldn't. But I was like, I'll stick a cap on. No one will see me. But yeah, they were pretty desperate times, as we all remember. But yeah, I was just, I think identity is interesting, because I always feel job satisfaction is so important, especially if you're in the entertainment industry. Because if you feel like you're not contributing, or if you feel like you're being taken for granted, well, no check is going to fix that. Maybe it will temporarily, but after a while, it'll eat away at you. So, like any band dynamics, there's always going to be, boy bands, you're always going to have one lead singer or 2 main lead singers. And sometimes the lads who are doing all the harmonies and stuff, and vital role in the band, but sometimes you think, I need more than, I need something more than this. And that comes in waves with all bands. And I know the guys from NSYNC, not all of them, but I've met them all. I know the Backstreet Boys, met them all. And all the European guys as well. And it's when I talk to them on this podcast, I've had Chris on this podcast, Chris Kirkpatrick, Joey Fatone, one of the guys from Jeff Timmons from 98 Degrees, equally the guys from Take That over here in the UK, and Boyzone over here in the UK and Ireland. And they all, band dynamics. It's like, I remember Gary Barlow. I don't know if you know who Gary Barlow is, but he's the front lead singer-songwriter of a huge European boy band that was big in the 90s called Take That. Mm-hmm. And Robbie Williams, if you've heard of Robbie Williams, he came from Take That.
Right.
And Gary talks about a band being like a family tree. There's the manager at the top and the lead singer, and the rest of the guys are like the baubles down the sides. Mm. And sometimes the manager, most of the time, loves the lead singer more than anybody.
Right. And
the rest can feel a little bit unloved. So I always joke now with one of our managers who's been there from the start. there was 5 of us, obviously, at the beginning. And I say, Louis, I was your 6th favorite member, even though there was only 5 of us. You know, I don't know why, but we get on better now. But yeah, band dynamics, as you guys well know, are very, very tricky, very tricky.
Well, it's interesting. I think it's probably different. It hadn't really occurred to me until you were describing that, how different band dynamics might be in a singing group where you have 4 or 5 people who are more or less equals competing for the attention or the spotlight. It's not that it's not that way in a band. I mean, you obviously, I at times had jealousy about, Adam getting all the attention and that type of thing. I'm sure that to a certain extent there was competitiveness in terms of wanting to be the one that people were looking at for some reason. However, I wasn't trying to be the lead singer. I knew my role in the band, and as a musician at a certain point you own that. Like I play the keyboards, I play it well, and this is my role in this band. But in a singing group, you've got 4 or 5 people who are all singers and all want to be the frontman, ideally. So I imagine competition as an athlete, is that something that was natural for you, bringing competition into it? Did it to any extent? Was it a positive? Because I know, like, for instance, Lennon and McCartney, the competition between the two of them drove some of their greatest creativity because they were pushing each other to outdo each other. Was that positive or was it a negative?
Well, firstly, I'm a very competitive guy, and that does come from sport. I'm very competitive. Like, if I lose anything, I don't talk. I'm not proud of this, but even if I lose, when I was a kid, if I lost a game of Xbox, or back then it was PlayStation, with my best friends, I'd be like kicking the table, pushing the chair. Although I'm not proud of that, I don't think you can take that out of somebody. It's like when you see young kids on the football field that want to throw a tackle in, and once it's done in a controlled manner, you're not kicking people or you're not, hurting people. But if somebody has that little bit of grit and determination, I think it would be wrong to take that out of them, particularly if they have ambitions of being a sports star at the highest level. And I do believe that all sports stars at the highest level have that competitive edge and streak. Sure. Whether it's NFL or basketball or whatever it is, everyone has to have it. But I knew my role in Westlife, so I'm not as good a singer as Shane and Mark. My 2 lead singers in Westlife, they are, and I mean this, and if you don't, I'm sure you guys don't know our band, but if you listen to our records, they absolutely all over every other boy band singer in the world. And I include all the guys, and I've met all the guys. And by the way, Justin and JC are incredible singers. The guys in the Backstreet Boys are incredible singers. But Shane and Mark are out of this world. Shane it's like he's the record every time he sings. Mm-hmm. There's never a mistake. There's never, and I hope they don't watch this because I obviously don't want them to hear me saying this. Yeah, you don't want them to think you actually
appreciate their talent.
But no, they are unbelievable. So when I joined Westlife, although I joined going, I'd love to be, the lead singer in the band I'm joining, I quickly knew my role is harmony and melody at times and different things. And then we did lower harmony and we would dip in and higher harmonies and different things. But the collective sound of the band on acapellas and on records was huge. And then we got in with the best songwriters, so the songs were top drawer. So the competitive edge, I guess, was there, but not to be the lead singer, because I don't think it's healthy for you wanting to be something that, not that you can't do, but there's a better role to achieve the greatness. Mm-hmm. So my strength in the band, apart from the harmonies and stuff, we all have our roles. So we're good on TV, we're good in interviews. The hosting side of it was really something that I took to, and being on radio, whether it was interviews like this, and everybody has those little roles to play, So I always felt important in the band. But there are times when, when you're in a band for as long as I'm in a band, you're going to fall in and fall out with all the band members all the time. Sure. But I think that's what makes the beauty of it. I said it to you on the show the other night. I mentioned the argument that you might have had at 11 a.m. is still there at 2 a.m. because you're still together. It's not like you've gone home for work. And that is true, but maybe that's okay because you iron it out. and the grudge isn't held for weeks and weeks, because that's unhealthy, you know.
It goes back to that conversation of identity, like you say. You know, there's a certain strength to knowing not just your limitations, but just knowing your role in a band, in a job, on a team. You know, if you're a defensive back and you're trying to run the ball up, and suddenly the strikers are going, "What are you doing?" You know, you're kind of playing outside yourself. And so I think there's such a benefit to being in a band, being in a job, being in a relationship where everyone pulls their weight and knows their limitations. I think it only helps the bigger picture. And it sounds like you guys, you know, over the many years have figured those roles out, and that's what makes you guys so successful.
Yeah, it just on that before we go back to you, Ron. It's always been best foot forward. Now, as a band evolves, you've got to make time and areas for everybody to flourish, because that's important too.
Yeah.
And that's I think a big part of we've been able to mature as a band and grow up as a band, because we know who the lead singers are. That's never going to be challenged. But also the fans also want to hear different pockets and different moments of all the guys. And that's important too. But we see that, we understand that. So we have a good, healthy relationship when it comes to that.
Well, it's an interesting point that you touch on, because I think, you know, you're somebody who, it seems, was very ambitious from an early age. You had a vision that you were going to be successful, even famous, even wildly rich, and have the kind of, maybe it was going to be soccer, maybe it was going to be music, ended up being music. But I think we live in a time now, especially with social media and stuff, where a lot of young people look at images of what they want their life to be, and they have this vision of, or the kind of messages you receive is like, don't settle for anything less than greatness. You know, you're going to be the biggest star in the world. You're going to be this or that. And the reality is, you can be ambitious, but still be realistic. You can understand what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and not be delusional about it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's an interesting place that you talk about, you describe, in terms of like, you never sold yourself short. You went for the stars in terms of success in music, but you also had some humility to be able to understand that your role was not necessarily going to be that one guy at the front.
Right.
And I think that's an important lesson for a lot of people to understand, is like, you can have big dreams, and you can say to yourself, I'm going to be the greatest version of myself I can possibly be. I'm going to shoot for the stars, but also understand that not everyone is Michael Jordan, and not everyone is going to be David Beckham, or, you know what I mean? Sometimes your very best is a crucial element, right?
Yeah, totally. And it's because I came from football, I always equate a lot of the stuff we do to football dressing rooms, you know. So we'll come in after maybe we do 5 or 6 songs. Now you guys, I'm sure, never did this with, you know, quick changes, you know, you change of outfit during the show. You might come off and go back on for an encore. But from a pop tour, you might do 5 or 6 songs, come off to a play out and get changed. You've got 60 seconds. You'll have seen the videos where people are ripping clothes off you and Velcroing suits back on, and you go back for the next song. But in our quick changes, that's where we're having the best fun. And sometimes not fun, as in fighting or arguing. But I'll be saying, lads, we need to lift our game here. That crowd isn't like last night's crowd. And I will say things like, I think we're 1-0 down, lads. We need to score. We need to equalize. And we have that kind of banter, so to speak. But it is, so when you talk about football in a band, it's like there's going to be the goal scorer. There's going to be the midfielder. There's going to be the defender. And obviously, there's going to be a goalkeeper. So not everybody's going to be Ronaldo. Not everybody is going to be or Messi. Not everybody's going to be scoring every goal.
Right.
But without the midfielder winning the ball and giving it to Ronaldo and Messi or whoever, the team's not going to win. They're not going to win. Every role is important. And you're right. You know, I did shoot for the stars. I still do. And I know my role in the band. And I think then selfishly, away from the band, I had to challenge myself like you did and go, well, what else would I like to do? What else am I good at? And if I'm not good at it, how do I become good at it? So I loved being behind a camera. I loved being behind a microphone. So hosting national radio for 5 years my experience with Westlife had me on radio for 14 years, but as a guest. But all of a sudden, I was the anchor. But I absolutely thrived in it. Like, we went around from everything you guys did. We did Ryan Seacrest. We did it all. You know, all those shows. And then equally all over Australia. And we're still doing it. But when I was on those shows, even as a 19, 20-year-old, I'm looking at Ryan and I'm going, I could do his job. Yeah. I like what he's doing.
Not so hard.
You know, and that might sound delusional, but I think it was confidence, and then you learn your craft. And I had the opportunity then in Ireland to do that, and I still have it on occasion, and I absolutely loved it. When I hosted Dancing with the Stars here for 5 seasons, obviously co-hosted it, you know, with a girl and a guy. I was the guy, obviously. Yeah, loved it. Absolutely loved it.
So, you know, obviously the work ethic and those skills that you learned, whether on the football pitch, in your band, that you've now applied to your career beyond as a host and all those things, enormous success throughout those years. But obviously it couldn't have always been like that, right? And so we love to find out on this show a time in your past when maybe things didn't come so easy and maybe things were a little hard to breathe. So what's an example of, during that journey, something made it a little difficult for you to breathe? You know, was there a part where when the band ended where you thought, what am I going to do with myself? You know, what was one of those moments where there wasn't such success and it became a little bit harder to breathe?
Again, this is something that's well documented over this side of the world. So in 2009, so we were 11 years old as a band. We were about to embark, we just recorded a new album, and we were about to embark the promotional campaign that inevitably sells the album. So that's, as we discussed earlier, radio, TV, flights all over the world, etc. And we were about to embark on a UK radio tour, which involved starting in London and getting on a tour bus and doing all the breakfast radio in London and then lunchtime, and then traveling overnight on the bus to, say, Manchester or a different part, and covering maybe 5 cities in 3 days, and really hammering the radio network. And it was going to take about maybe 4 days. So I was in Dublin Airport, about to fly out, and I live quite close to Dublin Airport. I'm only like 15 minutes from the airport. I got a call from my mom, and she said, I can't get your dad. She said, he's not answering the phone. So my dad had just turned 60, and I'd surprised him with a Harley Davidson motorcycle about 9 months before that. So he was 60 and 9 months. And I was always terrified he would fall off the motorbike. So the first question I asked was, did he go to work on the bike? And she said, no, he didn't. He went in the car. So that was a quick relief. So I said, okay, well, look, I'm just throwing my stuff together here in the house. I'm going to go to the airport, and then I'll give him a call. And usually there's a VIP platinum area of Dublin Airport that the record company would usually book us through, that you're not going through the normal way of the airport. And, you know, you kind of go in, it costs way much more money, but you go in through a different way and you get driven to the plane, basically, right? And it was a normal plane. It wasn't a private plane or anything, but, you know, they check in for you and they do all that. So on that particular day, I don't remember why, but on that day, I wasn't booked through that way. I was booked through, we'll say, the regular way. So what that then meant was, when I dropped my bag, I had to go through security with, you know, crowds of people. That's okay. I have no issue with that. But what I'm painting the picture is, I didn't really have time to call my dad. So it took a bit longer for me to drop the bag, get through security, get out the other side, and get myself to the gate to have 40 minutes, an hour before the plane boarded. So I phoned him on the way to the airport and I didn't get him. So then when I had all that ahead of me, I said, I'll call him when I get through. So did the security checks, all of that, got to the gate and sat at the gate for a minute. And then I went, well, my dad didn't call me back. And that's taken 45 minutes. And then I went, my mom called me about an hour and a half ago. And she hasn't called me back to say she's got him. So I phoned my mom. Phoned my dad again. He didn't answer. Phoned my mom. And I said, did you get Dad? And she said, no. And I remember my heart sinking. So I'm sitting at the gate. And I'm thinking, shit, there must be something wrong. There has to be. But I didn't want to worry her. So I think that's the harder to breathe moment, which got a lot worse. I'd be a quite positive guy. I would be a worrier at heart, particularly about my own family. But I remember thinking, I'm about to get on a plane for an hour where I'm going to be uncontactable to London. If something's wrong and I land, it's going to be another couple of hours by the time I be able to get back on a different plane back home. I need to deal with this now. Now, something was in my mind that something was wrong. And I remember when I was signing for Leeds United, to go back when I was 16, to go back to that story, I remember at 15, 16, the night before I was leaving home, packing up to go to England, I remember being quite upset in my house, in bed, and my dad sitting on the end of the bed. And he says, this is, what's wrong? It's your dream. What? I understand you're leaving home, it's a big moment, but like we're only 45 minutes an hour flight away. And he said, what's your biggest worry? And I said, something happening to somebody else while I'm away. And he said, if that happens, I'll come and get you. I will fly to England. I'll get you. We'll come home together. So that gave me the security at 16 to go off and take on the world. So skip now to 2009 when I'm, this is happening. There was something in my mind telling me something's wrong and I cannot get on this plane. So I phoned him again and no answer. So I knew a friend of mine's younger brother worked in the same building, but I didn't have his number. And that friend was living in Australia. Okay. So I phoned the friend and I said, I'd like to speak to your brother Neil. Can you got a number for him? So he called out the number. At this point, I've boarded the plane and I'm sitting in row 7. I still have the boarding pass, row 7A. So I'm in at the window. There's a middle seat that there was nobody in and there was a girl in the aisle. And then so on. So I memorized the number and I phoned the number. And Neil answered. And I said, Neil, have you seen my dad this morning? And he said, yeah, he came in about 10:30. This was probably now 1 p.m. And he said, he's upstairs. I said, can you run to his office? Would you mind? Because I'd been in that building so I could visualize. So he said, sure. So as he's running up the 3 flights of stairs on the phone to me, the air hostess is saying, you need to turn your phone off. Mm. We're taxiing from the gate. We've all been there. And I said, yeah, no problem. 1 second. So as he opens the door to my dad's office, he said, I'm just walking in now. And then the phone went dead. And I remember thinking, well, the worst is he's on the floor dead. Or how could something at that point, phone cut, at that point. So I phoned him back. He didn't answer. I phoned him back. And it was like a race against time because the plane had moved away from the gate. We were now driving slowly to the runway. And eventually he answered. And he was quite distressed. And he said, he's on the floor. He doesn't look good. He looks a little grey. And I jumped out of the seat over the girl. And I ran up to the top of the plane. And when you see that and you're on a plane, everybody looks, everybody's panicking, everybody's saying, who's this crazy guy running to the front of the plane? But also, I was such a recognizable face that I was also knowing as I did that, everybody knew it was the guy from Westlife. So that was in my mind. And the girl, the air hostess stopped me at the top before you'd reach the cockpit. And she said, what's going on? And I said, my dad's just collapsed. I need to get off this plane immediately. And she said, no problem. Just step to the side there where the kind of toilets gap is. Mm-hmm. And she said, and she opened the door of the cockpit, whatever she said. She came back and she said, we're making our way back in. Anyway, long story short, the story goes on. My dad had passed away very suddenly from a heart attack. He probably had been dead for a couple of hours at least. We don't know. But Q, absolute chaos. My sister, a couple of years older than me, she was pregnant at the time. I was worried about phoning her because she was obviously heavily pregnant. My younger brother's 11 years younger than me. He was in college in Dublin city centre, and I thought, I don't want to really call him. My mum was home alone, and she'd been trying to get him since 11 a.m. So I phoned my brother-in-law, who's married to my sister, because his wife is pregnant, my sister, and I said, look, I think my dad's in trouble. I think he's passed away. And he, I phoned my best friend, and I said, I need you to go to drive to my mom's house, because he was closer than I was. And I said, and when you're there, phone me, and then I'll talk to my mom, because I needed to know somebody was with her.
Yeah.
And then I phoned my wife, and she spun around and drove to Dublin Airport to collect me. And then she collected me, and I drove to my sister to be there for her. And then I phoned my brother, another friend, to drive to my brother, who was in college, to make sure he was there. So, yeah, the story goes on, but I suppose to answer your question, it's a long-winded story. Yeah, very sad, very sudden. And that's a moment then where your world changes forever. I don't know if either of you has lost parents, but it's part of the circle of life. It's shit. It's, hard. It's everything that you hate it to be and more. I'm sure the only thing worse than that is losing a child or a spouse, because you're expected to lose your parents. But suddenly like that with no goodbye, and he was just turned 60. Yeah, that was a tough one. That was a tough one to take. But, that was 14, no longer, not 2009, what's that? 15 years ago now. And like, you move on, you get better, you recover. Life's never the same, ever.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to learn to pick yourself up. So I would, and I know this podcast is quite, you deal with a lot, and you deal with a lot of mental health, which is brilliant. My dad was so good in this department. At any of our problems, he would be able to fix just by sitting down. He had an unbelievable way of, if you felt you were suffering from anxiety, or if you felt, and remember when we were kids, anxiety wasn't discussed. Right. Panic attacks weren't discussed. Mental health was for soft people. That was the way it was. Toughen up. Yeah. My dad wouldn't say any of those things. He'd always just say, positive thinking. As much as you can, positive thinking will help. Mm-hmm. If you've got bad thoughts, negative thoughts, unhealthy thoughts, worry, try and think positively as much as you can. Change your environment, go for a walk, go for a run, and consistently. Now look, what I'm saying doesn't fix everything. Right. But he was our Superman. He was able to give us the tools to deal with that,
Well, just that story of him sitting on the end of your bed, I mean, it's so telling of that he was compassionate and felt what you were going through and tried to give you a solution rather than just let you suffer by yourself. It's beautiful.
Yeah, he sounds like a great guy, and it sounds like his lessons really rubbed off on you a lot too, because when I hear you speak, you're a very positive person. You're always thinking optimistically about moving forward, even when you had a real disappointment in your life with the soccer, and that was your hopes and dreams. You pivoted really quickly and well from one dream to another dream. I wonder though, because for people that have been very blessed in life as you and I have, there's oftentimes a feeling like everything is always going to go well, and you don't really expect things to you don't expect tragedy. Not that any of us expect tragedy, but when you come from a really tragic background, sometimes you do have that condition where you expect everything to go wrong all the time, right? But if things are going well and you do have that kind of support system and that positivity where you're always thinking optimistically, I know for me, when I had a moment in my life when I got my heart broken, somebody that I really cared about, kind of stabbed me in the back, and I didn't see it coming at all. It really affected my outlook. For the first time in my life, I was like, oh my God, maybe I need to rethink this positivity. Maybe not everyone is good. Maybe the world isn't so great all the time. And of course, leaving the band, that was another thing I had to deal with that really shook me to the core in terms of my optimism about life and the future. When you've had all this success and you're living this blessed life, and you have family, you have success, you have money, you have fame, and then all of a sudden, that is a very human experience happens that we all go through at some point, loss, but don't expect it in the middle of life, right, in those moments, and it comes out of nowhere. How does that affect your worldview? Are you able to move forward and continue to have that positive mindset, or what did you have to do to regain that? It's
a great question, but I had to keep thinking of what he would tell me. I really, really, but I was angry. I was sad every day, Now maybe that is depression, by the way, guys. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe I never went to a grief counselor. Maybe I should have. I dealt with it myself. But I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that either. If you feel if you can't get through it, by all means. But I often wondered, what would he say? And I know I made him. We all his kids did, but I know I made him proud because I lived his dreams. He wanted to be the rock star. You know, I was the one on the stage. I was lucky enough, and although I was delusional thinking, and I still have it, and I still think I'm going to host on TV in America, and I still think I'm going to be in a Hollywood movie, and I still think I'm going to play Madison Square Garden. We have to have those crazy thoughts. But I think with him, I was able to treat the family. I surprised him with a Mercedes one time for Christmas morning. But, you know, it's weird when I think back, because I kind of, in the back of my mind, did I always fear that day? I think I did. Mm. You know, I think I wondered, what if a lot? Even when I was 16 on the bed with that night, I was worried about what will happen when I go over to a different country. He made it okay in the moment, obviously, but, you know, I it was always like a sixth sense of, is something going to happen? When Westlife became so big and so successful, don't get me wrong, we were a good band. We were a really good boy band, don't get me wrong. But we're also very lucky. We were right place, right time. Everybody needs that. Now, we did grab the opportunity with two hands and ran with it. And we were charming to everybody. We said thank you. We said please. We shook cameramen and women's hands. We would go to meet the directors. We were those guys. We wanted it so badly that we wanted to make a good impression all of the time. Now that comes with upbringing, by the way, as well. Can't fake that. That's either in you or it's not. But I think, you know, I wondered when everything was going so well with the band, I often was scared shitless that something like this might happen, and it did. Now, you know, but you know, he was a parent. And I had a great relationship with him. I know plenty of people who hate their fathers, who don't get on with their dads, who their dads were never in their lives. That was the complete opposite to me. My dad was there every step, you know, and my mother still is, thankfully. But so I'm blessed that I had 30 years. I was 30 when he died, so I'm blessed I had those 30 years with him. Did he scold me and tell me I was an idiot when I was as a kid? Of course. That's what parents do, and that's what they should do.
That's our job as dads, right?
Exactly.
Tell our kids are acting like idiots.
But he was one in a million. There's no doubt.
I'm curious how you cope with that. And I know we're running out of time, so I'll keep it short. But I think some people deal with, when these things happen, you deal with them sometimes in healthy ways, sometimes in not so healthy ways. We all have our own coping styles, how we get through difficult things. And it sounds to me, in describing your life, you've always been a doer. You've always been somebody who, you talk about in the pandemic, who just wanted to go out and have something that gives you purpose. You know, like, I need to have a job to do. And it sounds to me like that's the way you've gotten through a lot of tough things in life and overcome things. And it's just, you've set challenges for yourself, and you've always been active, and you're always doing and achieving things. Is that how you dealt with that loss, or was there a time when you weren't able to do that? How did you cope with the grief that we all have to go through when we lose someone like that?
When I talk about my dad saying positive thoughts, I think he always would say, and my mother as well, would always say things like, you've got to be in charge of your own mind. Now, I know you've studied psychology, Ryan, and I haven't. But I think I know that an idle mind starts to wander, and it's probably unhealthy. But that an overactive mind equally is unhealthy. So it's a happy medium of, I need to be busy, but if I do too much, I'll crash out. And if I'm doing nothing, eventually I'll crash out. So, you know, I think that was always in my mind. Now, when that all happened, it was November 2009, and the album obviously was coming out. The strangest thing, that day, the album was mastered, but the artwork was being absolutely mastered. Do you remember the days when the artwork, you had to settle on the picture you were going to use as the front cover in the middle of the inlet, and then there was the song lyrics, and I don't know if you ever guys did thank yous, where you'd write, sure, personal thank yous. I'd like to thank my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, and whatever you wrote on that had to be submitted to be printed. And inevitably, every band runs over that deadline. Somebody in the band hasn't submitted their thank yous. I had submitted my thank yous. However, one of the guys in the band, Keane's dad, had passed away 2-3 months before my dad, but he had fought a battle with he'd been sick for a year, so and that was awful as well, because the guy we knew, one of the dads from the band's dad, the guy we knew so well, had really deteriorated and fought so hard. But when we went to that funeral in the August, I remember we were in LA maybe 3 weeks later, and we were in with Bruno Mars actually, and this was before Bruno Mars was famous. That's a different story. He was playing us all these records. We were doing around the houses looking for songs, and we arrived at this studio, and there's this little guy with a trilby hat at the mixing desk, and he's like, "Hey guys, how are you?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're looking for this stuff." I go, "Yeah, well, I've got this," and he played us like 4 or 5 songs, and we went, "Nah, none of these. Don't see the hits in any of these. None of these for us. Thank you for your time. See you soon." That guy was Bruno fucking Mars, and we turned him down. Now, I'm not sure he played Grenade or any of those big hits for us, right. But yeah, we turned him down. So anyway, a couple of months later, when my dad passed, that's when I had about a week, maybe 2 weeks, of really feeling terrible. Not being able to get out of bed. I did get out of bed, but not wanting to get out of bed. Mm-hmm. But the important part was the album needed to be promoted, right? I couldn't let my mates down. Mm-hmm. We had TVs booked, we had flights booked around the world. We were performing on the equivalent of all the chat shows, not America obviously, but all of those style of chat shows all over the world. So we have to do it. The night he died, just to finish on the submitting the album thank yous, my mate in the band, Keane, who'd gone through it with his dad a couple of months previous, he rang me, and they all spoke to me that day, but because they were all in England, he rang me and he called me and he said, I hate saying this to you, but I know how important this is going to be to you. We have to submit this album thing tonight. And you know that I already have a photograph of my dad in the album cover with a thank you, because he died 2 months previously, so he'd loads of time to write what he wanted to write about his dad, put the picture in, really dedicate the album to his dad. And he said, I think you need to do it tonight, but if you want to dedicate the album to both our fathers, you need to write something tonight. This was the night my dad died. He died at 11 a.m., say, or 12 noon. This was like 3 in the morning. I remember sitting in the front room. I had twin boys. I sat in their front. They were in the same room at the time. And I sat in between the two of them with tears in my eyes. And I wrote out the album thank you, dedicating the album to my dad. Because otherwise, it was going to be missed. And let's say our next album might not have been for a year or 2 or 3. And then, the time might have passed for dedicating the album. So I wrote it so raw, with tears rolling down my face. And that's that album. That album's called Where We Are. And yeah, it was one of those things. But 2 weeks, I think, of not wanting to get out of bed. Then you kind of roll on. The world moves on. When this happens to somebody, everybody around your family are brilliant. Everybody works off adrenaline. People cannot be nicer. They cannot be more helpful. They'll do anything you want. They'll be in your house. They'll drop you here. They'll do whatever you need to do. They'll walk your dog. All they're short of doing is wiping your butt, right? But people have to go back to their normal lives. And that obviously happens within a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And that's when the reality sets in. And the first time, his birthday was in 2 weeks later. Christmas was 6 weeks later. So on and so forth. But I do remember being able to deal with it because I kept thinking positive thoughts. My dad would want me to continue. And about a year later, I'd been away around the world again promoting the record. And then I came home to have an afternoon of beers with my friends in the local pub that he used to perform in. And that's the pub that I used to be in on Saturday afternoons, putting up the gear, singing the songs, 1, 2 on the microphone. So we went into a different part of the bar to watch a football match at like 12 noon. We drank for maybe 5 or 6 hours. And then there was a side door into the function room, which was his room, which was what I described earlier, the 300, 400 people at Halloween. And so that room is kind of only now used for functions. But I knew the little secret way in. And I kicked the emergency exit when nobody was around. And I let it close behind me. And I walked into this room. and pitch dark. I turned on the lights and I sat on his stage. And when I say, guys, that I cried uncontrollably. Like it was coming from the root of my stomach. I cried more than I cried when he died. I cried more than I cried at the funeral. It just came out, and it wouldn't stop. And I couldn't stop. Now, my mom and dad's house, my mom's still obviously there. She's like 10-minute walk. So I left the bar after 30 minutes, and I walked around to her, and I went in. And when I opened the door, or she opened the door, I was crying. I came in, and I cried and cried. And I probably cried all in all for an hour and a half. And that was it. I got it all out. Not planned. It just all came. It built up maybe a year or two later, whatever it was. It all came out. And now I'll still get emotional every now and again on his birthday, or I'll play. There's an old Irish band, traditional Irish band called the Furies. And if you get a moment, listen to this song because it's really, really good. And it's called The Old Man. It's about obviously your dad, and it's a real traditional, moving song. So I play that now on his birthday in my car. Sorry, not on his birthday, on his anniversary, and I just have a little cry to myself in the car. I might not get tears. I might get glassy eyed, or I might get tears, but it'll last 4 or 5 minutes, and I move on. Yeah, it doesn't happen every year. Don't cry every year, but yeah, sometimes I drive by certain places. I remember he lifted me on his shoulders there. I remember him telling me he painted that building. Those type of moments will always happen, But yeah, it's just strange. Grief is unpredictable, very unpredictable.
Sounds like you have a healthy access to the emotions connected to your dad, and really have a lot of gratitude for the force he was in your life. And I wonder if being able to, or being forced to write that note in the album the day that it happened, was therapeutic to some extent. Like, nobody would think to myself, I have to do this tonight. But in the context of your life, you had to do that in that moment. And it sounds like it was very raw. It just what had to come out in that moment. And I wonder if that served you in some way in the long run, in terms of maybe processing something that most people would just be pushing down and not dealing with, if at all, for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe it did help. Maybe it did.
So I want to, before we sign off, I want to end on a funnier, happier note. I know the way that the way that we were introduced. You mentioned earlier Clive Davis and Andrew Berkowitz. Andrew has worked for Clive for a long time. Clive, after leaving Arista, started J Records, and we were signed to J Records and RCA, and so we have that in common in terms of the connection there. But Andrew was somebody that we met early on when we were involved with Clive. And I remember being in New York City, and I think we were playing out on Long Island somewhere. And we were, of course, as Maroon 5, we were like, we thought we were going to be the Strokes. We were a cool rock band. We weren't trying to be NSYNC or the Backstreet Boys. But Andrew Berkowitz, he came in right away. He opened up his phone. He's showing me pictures of him hanging out with O-Town and with Westlife and all these boy bands. And we're like, man, you're barking up the wrong tree. But of course, we both know Andrew is a funny, very funny guy. He's going to love this that we're talking here. And tell me about your experience with Andrew Berkowitz, because I have a lot of stories.
I have so many stories. My first memory of Andrew was, we were in Times Square, and we'd flown over to sign to Arista. And like I said, we were big at the other side of the world. So to walk around Times Square anonymous was crazy for us. Now, we'd always get the Europeans, with people walking by would notice us. But Andrew brought us over we wanted to go to McDonald's. But Andrew, as you know, be quite a healthy guy. And he's like, you want to go to McDonald's? So we walked over to Times Square, McDonald's, and we were like munching. Now, remember, we're jet lagged and we're munching on Big Macs. And I think he was pretty disgusted by these 5 Irish guys that, were munching. And then we went to an Irish bar, and we stayed till closing time, where the security would come over to us and say, guys, you really need to leave. And Andrew would say to us, guys, it's not cool in America to be the last people to leave the bar. And we said, well, in Ireland, it's not cool to be the first people to leave the bar. So we had all these funny moments going on. We'd always, in a fun, jovial way, have a laugh about the color of his teeth because he has really extreme white teeth and he flosses after every meal. And, he used to remind us of Ross from Friends quite a lot. Obviously, Anthony small, Ross probably quite big. But he had that kind of same look and kind of sense of humor from Ross from Friends' sense of humor. But we loved him. He was so supportive of us. He brought me to a couple of years later in 2009, maybe 10 years later, when 2008, we did about a year off from the band, and myself and Georgina, my wife, flew to New York, where I did New York New York Film Academy. I did an acting course for a month. And we were staying in the W Hotel down in Union Square. And we'd meet Andrew every other evening for dinner or walks or whatever. And I'd said to him, Andrew, I really want to get my teeth lightened. Like, so who do you recommend? He said, well, I'll take you to my guy. I don't know where, in New York, but I can't remember what street. So we went up in this, up the elevator to whatever floor, and he takes me to this guy. And I think this is probably illegal now or banned now, but they had that ultraviolet light that they would put on your teeth for like 20 minutes. They would rub gel. And I got through that okay. The odd little ping and twang that would hurt you. And then after a couple of sessions, within the hour, my teeth they were as blue as this. They were so blue. And you don't get to see it till you're finished. And I walked out. I remember the girl at the reception when I was paying was like, looking at me going, oh my God, your teeth are so light. I was like, shit, don't say that. Don't say that. What have I done? And even Andrew, who has the whitest teeth in the world, was like, oh my God, Nicky, your teeth are... So it took a while for the teeth to kind of calm down a little bit. But there was a funny moment as well with Andrew. He was in Ireland with Westlife, and you guys were on the carpet at the Grammys, and we were watching the Grammy carpet live on E. And he was like a little excited kid with his phone, his BlackBerry as it was back then. And he was like texting or emailing one of you on the carpet. So we're looking at like whoever the presenters were, and Maroon 5 were like in the background. And then one of yous are like looking at your phone and texting back. And he's like, I'm here, I'm in Dublin watching you live. And, he's such a good guy, very supportive, very, very supportive of us. And did everything he could to help Westlife through the years, in America, obviously. But yeah, he's O-Town is funny because he's equally as friendly with O-Town as he is with us or you guys. And there's a funny story with O-Town because if you go back to when Westlife were signed and all of that, Simon Cowell was our guy. America, we were signed to Clive. We were in Clive's office. I'm sure you've been in Clive's office where, he talks all about your career, what it's going to be. And there was a guy with him called Pete Edge. I think he was A&R. And he was telling us all about the Whitney story. And everybody I've spoken to tells us that Clive tells them the Whitney story of how he discovered Whitney and all of the rest. So we were the next big thing to happen in America, which didn't. And then we go back to the UK and the rest of the world, and we started concentrating on the next album. And Simon Cowell had come over to America to become friendly with Clive. And we always knew, we were told by Steve Mack, the songwriter of some of our biggest hits, Swear It Again, World of Our Own, Flying Without Wings, all these big records that I know you guys won't know, but these are really big songs. And these were all supposed to come out in the States. So, Steve had written all these records, but we had heard that he'd written another one for us, and he was our go-to guy. So Stephen and us started together. So we then heard that Simon had turned down a song called All or Nothing. Now, at that time, there was a show on MTV called Making the Band in America, which is where O-Town came out of. And NSYNC had gone, just finished. Justin had gone solo. Backstreet were on hiatus. America pop radio had kind of stopped. And O-Town had just got underneath the door with Making the Band. So they had that platform of the TV. And Clive, I found out the story the other day for real, but I'll tell you what I thought I knew. Was that Simon Cowell had turned down All or Nothing for Westlife, and that O-Town had taken it and making it the big hit. Because it's very Westlife sounding. It's like we've been around 4 or 5 years at that point. It's the piano intros, it's the big ballads, it's all those things written by the same guy. So Steve had the songwriter had told us, Simon turned it down, so I gave it to Clive and gave it to O-Town. So anyway, in the last couple of years, I'd heard Lance Bass on his podcast talking to Ashley from O-Town about the song. And I said, oh, can you believe Westlife turned it down? I'm listening to this podcast going, we did not turn this song down, right? Simon Cowell did. Don't blame us. So it had gone around. So when I got Jacob from O-Town on the other night, I said, right, I'm going to find out the exact story here. So I phoned Steve, the songwriter, pre the interview with Jacob. And we're in with Steve actually recording new material at the moment for our 25th anniversary. And I said, Steve, I want to know the truth. You write All or Nothing, what happens next? He says, like I always did. I phoned Simon Cowell. I went to see him. I played him the record. Here's the new Westlife single. What do you think? And Cowell passed and said, nah, we're going to do something else. We're not doing that. So he said, I at that point, Clive Davis had heard the record. How Clive heard it, I'm not fully sure whether Simon played it. Andrew Berkowitz might have played it. Steve Mack might have played it. I'm not sure. But Clive grabbed it and said, I want this song for Whitney Houston. So the song was going to Whitney. And then, at the last minute, when Clive signed O-Town, he said, I'll give it to O-Town. And the rest is history. So look, it's a massive hit for O-Town. Nobody could have done it better. It's a brilliant song. But it just goes to show the truth behind big songs like that. Songs get missed. Songs get passed on. But we can hold our hands up and say it wasn't Westlife who turned it down.
Wasn't our fault.
It was Go. But yeah, Andrew's aware of all of that. Andrew was a part of all of that. When we were in the States, he would constantly tell us where you guys were and what you boys were up to. And we might have missed you a couple of times while you were going to LA or we were going to Boston or whatever. So, yeah, fun times.
Yeah, I don't even remember exactly what Andrew's title was. I know he was like VP of Artist Relations or something like that. And when I first met him, I thought, oh, he's like Clive's right-hand man. He like seems to go everywhere and he knows everyone. And then I realized like he's just like a little boy. He's like a super fan of all of these bands. And he opens up his phone and he just has photos of hanging out with all of his artists. And he just he came on our bus and toured with us for like 2 weeks. I don't think there was any real function to it other than he just wanted to be around us and have fun. And so it was nice for me because I think I came from a very different background as a garage rocker as a teenager, where like I was not all that excited or impressed by the machinery of the pop world. Like I said, we weren't, at least in our minds. I know we ended up probably in some people's minds sort of being in the realm of the boy bands, but that was not who we were in our minds. And I remember, like even going into Clive Davis's office and this incredible scene where you imagine it's like a scene in the movie Wall Street. He had this corner office overlooking Central Park. And it's like, does any person actually have this office? He's got a bathroom in his office. It's like, it looks like everything is gold plated and beautiful. And we really had never had a meeting with him. We sit down in his office. This is after we already had a big hit. It was either This Love or She Will Be Loved. And he gives us his sage wisdom, which is, don't be afraid to be pop. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, I was like, well, that sounds pretty self-serving. This is your record label. Don't be afraid to be even bigger. We already have a number one hit. Like, write more of those. And thinking about it, like, of course, that's what he wanted was for us to be the biggest pop band of the world. But at least in my mind still, I was like, well, we got to be cool. We got to be underground. But Andrew Berkowitz was the kind of guy who, like, I don't know, he kind of brought me down to earth because it was like, don't take yourself so seriously. This is fun. This is about making songs that people want to dance and sing to. This is the life. And so I just have a fondness for him in those memories because he was.
And he's so well connected. 2 years ago, when we decided to do that story I told you about doing America, so we're doing Radio City and all that, we decided to go over and do Good Morning America. Now, as it happened, we booked in Good Morning America way before the shows went on sale, maybe a month before. But our shows went on sale and they sold out on the first day. But we still went over and did Good Morning America, even though the shows were sold out. So we did 2 songs. So when I arrived in New York with the guys, straight on to Andrew, and he said, I'll see you there in the morning. I'm going to meet you there at 6 a.m. or 5, whatever time you get to GMA. And he arrives in, and he's nothing to do with us anymore. He's now just a friend. He's not with our record label. He's none of this. And he arrives in. I said, but do you need me to leave some passes for you to... And he's like, I mean, come on, Nicky. I know all these guys. These are my people. So, like, he's so well connected. He was able to go up, rock into our dressing room in Times Square on Good Morning America, and like as if he was promoting the band. He's great.
I love that you threw "I mean" in there because that was that's how he starts every sentence. I mean.
I was like, Andrew, we're coming over to do Radio City. I mean, are you going to sell that? Nobody fucking knows you in America. I'm like, yeah, I know. Thanks for the humbleness here. But, we need to try.
I don't even know this guy, and I love the impression.
Yeah. His other favorite saying whenever he come on the bus is...
He'd be great on TV, by the way. He would be great on TV as a panelist or something.
You know what, Duck, we should invite him on the show. I mean, I don't think the general public knows who he is, but he's a great character. Yeah, done.
Well, I mean, the people who are listening to your podcast, they don't know who I am as well. So the stories he tells, he's worked with Whitney, Alicia Keys,
Christina
you
Aguilera.
guys, Christina, Westlife. Like, he's done it all. Like, he's a story to tell.
Sure, for sure. Well, Nicky, you have some great stories to tell, and I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing them with us. It's been sounds like an incredible life that you've lived, and still to be ambitious and doing the things that you're doing, after all of your success is really impressive. And I wish you the best, and I do think that you could still be, in a hit movie and at Madison Square Garden, and anything you set your mind to, you seem to achieve. So,
I'm getting old now. I'm gonna have to be like the dad or the granddad in the movie now. I can't be a young guy no more. Those days are gone.
Hey, the dad roles are good roles, man. Trust me, they pay the bills just the same.
All right. Well, thank you again, Nicky. It's been a pleasure. And Nicky Byrne of Westlife has been our guest on this episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. Join us every Tuesday for new episodes. We'll see you next time right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast.